Hi everyone, it's Dr. C, and today I am bringing you lecture in front of one of the most interesting paintings I saw last year, which is a painting of the Last Supper, of course, a very famous meal. But this is from Lima, Peru, and you can tell that it is from Peru because in the Last Supper, their version, they eat guinea pig. When you have the Last Supper depicted in different parts of the world, they actually change up what they think Jesus ate. And so today we're going to be talking about the importance of food and cuisine and how different cuisines from different parts of the world affect the way that those people think about the world and the values that they express. So today we are going to focus on the anthropology of food. And this is both food in the sense of consumption, but also in the sense of all of the rituals and symbolic meanings that are an important part of food in every society around the world. So first off, why is food important? We've already talked about food a little bit this semester when we talked about economic anthropology, and that's because many anthropologists of food focus on sustenance, how people actually get the food that they need in terms of nutrition and stability. And so we look at subsistence patterns, hunters and gatherers, pastoralists, nomads, etc., and we look at the way that food integrates into their economic systems and their everyday life. Anthropologists also are particularly interested in food because food is the greatest marker of inequality. We are able to understand other social differences, whether it be race, class, gender, socioeconomic status, etc. We are able to understand those better, and especially the disparities between people, by looking at the way that food is consumed by different groups. Food is a marker of cuisine and identity. Food is a part of people's history, it's a part of their religion and other traditions. And so understanding food rituals and understanding when and where foods are consumed help us to think about what really matters to a society and how they express their own unique identity in this world. So, as I said, when we look at sustenance, we're particularly interested in three major ideas. How do groups of people obtain food? In other words, how do they get it from the earth and from their natural environment? We're also interested in the way that food is distributed, and this includes markets from both the local level all the way up to the global. And we want to understand how food is shared and how it actually moves from one group of people to another. And then finally, we are interested in the consumption of food. And so this includes all of the practices, the techniques, all of the ways that we have to prepare, serve, and then actually eat that food. So all of this is connected to economics in a deeply important way because if you have very little money, you spend it on food. Like, food is the basic resource that everyone needs. You can't get away from that. You can't choose not to have food. And so understanding how people get food, how they share food, and then how they consume that food helps us to understand basic economics of a group of people. We also are particularly interested in the way that people interact with their environment, and food is a really important part of this study. And that's because food is inherently tied to environment. Our food comes from the environment, whether that's growing food or capturing or raising animal products. But also, food tells us a lot about the ecosystem that it comes from. And as somebody who's traveled around the world, this is one of the things that's most interesting for me. When you go to different parts of the world, people eat different types of foods. And we actually have a concept that sort of explains this, the idea of if it grows together, it goes together. And this should make a lot of sense to you if you love eating Mexican food. Well, what kind of things really make Mexican food unique and give it that identity? Corn, peppers, beans. These are all natively grown in Mexico and Mesoamerica. In other words, these are a product, a natural product of their environment. So it's not a surprise that these foods go together really, really well. It's not a surprise that their flavor profiles match very well. And it's the same when you go to Bali, when you go to sub-Saharan Africa. Foods that grow in the same ecosystem tend to taste good together. And that's part of how our interaction with our environment becomes really localized and becomes really connected to culture as a byproduct of the ecosystem that it comes from. You eat foods in your society that grow where your society exists. And so that's that idea that they grow together, they taste good together, they develop into a cuisine together. What grows together goes together is both kind of a cultural idea, but also really an ecological idea as well. Now, food helps us to understand inequality. And a lot of times Americans don't think about this because almost all of us are pretty far up on the socioeconomic chain if we're talking about like a global system. However, about 45%, almost half of the world's population, lives on under $5.50 a day. And like here in America, we buy coffees that are $5.50. And so when you think about, half of the world living on under $5.50 a day, think about how much of that actually goes to food. And food is, relatively priced depending on where you live. But even still, for people who are on incredibly small budgets, food is the first thing you have to pay for, as we've talked about. And 1 in 4 children around the world are malnourished. And that's a lot of people. And that number is going to go up exponentially because of COVID, as more and more people fall under poverty lines on a global level, as global food distribution networks are disrupted. We're going to see that number grow up. But 1 out of every 4 kids around the world has some form of malnutrition. In the United States, 1 out of every 5 children, that's 20% of kids, don't know where their next meal is coming from. Some of you may fall into that category. I definitely fell into that category when I was a kid growing up. For a developed country, that's kind of shocking. We're the only country in the developed world that has this degree of, food insecurity, especially for kids. This is also part of the reason that when COVID started, all of the schools that were closing down went, wait a second, do you realize how many millions of kids depend on schools just for their food? That's a really unusual circumstance in the developed world. Like the idea that we actually have to go to school in order to be fed, that's really problematic. And so one of the big challenges in American society is trying to address why our numbers are so bad compared to the rest of the developed world. And in many countries, but the US is really the best case example of this, we actually use food as like a code word or dog whistle for poverty shaming. So if you think about in the United States, when we talk about, people of certain socioeconomic classes or people of certain races just don't understand nutrition, they don't know how to feed their kids properly. In most cases, they do know how to feed their kids properly. It's that they don't have access to high quality food at an affordable price. And we've already talked about 1 out of 5 kids in America already facing food insecurity. But in the US, we also have a lot of kids that don't have good nutrition because food is so expensive in the United States compared to everywhere else. And so we use the idea of food shaming as a way of actually just poverty shaming. And that's something that's really unique to the US and really problematic for us. Food also gives us a lot of insight into gender. And that's because pretty much everywhere in the world, part of the female gender role is the production of food. And so food is often seen as women's work, particularly the cooking, preparing, and serving of food. That's seen as women's work. And yet, around the world, who are the top chefs in every restaurant, right? Now, this is beginning to change, but overwhelmingly, the top chefs were male. And in many cases, they built their fame on the idea of using grandmother's recipes or cooking like my mama did or like my nona did or like auntie did, right? So we look at food and we see a massive gender imbalance. Women are expected to spend large amounts of their time ensuring that food is produced and served for the family. But when it's time to take that knowledge and share it with the world and profit off of it, men are the ones who are able to do that because of male dominance in many societies. At the same time, because women were often responsible for food production and consumption, that meant that they were able to pass values on to the next generation, because so many of our values, religious values, cultural values, gender values, race, etc., many of those values are expressed through food. And it's because women were kind of like the gatekeepers of those abilities, those foods and ideas, they became the gatekeepers for those values, right? And this is especially true, for example, in Judaism, right? Where men were not allowed to express Judaism out in public, families were supposedly converted, but women at home were the ones making all the recipes and keeping all of the values and traditions of the religion alive through food and through family meals. So it's not a surprise that Judaism is a matrilineal religion. And finally, food is also incredibly important when we talk about gender, because in many cases, when parts of the developing world are trying to improve economically, women are able to take those skills that they learned in the kitchen and try to open sort of low scale restaurants. And in many cases, if you invest in a woman and her restaurant, those are going to be economically successful. And so we talked about this when we talked about economics, but investing in women in the developing world is a way to improve the financial success of countries. And in many cases, women work with what they are already familiar, so food culture. And you guys saw that a lot in the Taco Chronicles. You'll see that in Street Food as well when you watch that documentary. For that assignment, women are heavily involved in food entrepreneurship, right? Or starting their own businesses related to the concept of food. Now, one of the ideas I want to be sure everybody understands when it comes to cultural anthropology is that of a cuisine. A cuisine is a style of cooking that is associated with a specific culture or geographic region. And some of you talked about this in your papers. You talked about the importance of Italian cuisine, or Thai cuisine, or Chinese cuisine to your identity. Cuisines are incredibly important when it comes to immigrations. Immigrants will bring their cuisines with them as a way of maintaining their identity and maintaining their sense of self. In addition, cuisines tie back into that idea of it grows together, it goes together, but the idea of our environment shaping our foods. So different regions have cuisines that match the geographic environment and the ecology that they drew their recipes from. And so when I travel to Peru, they have a very distinct cuisine based on the ingredients that they can get from the Andes, from the jungle, from the coastal areas, and that's combined with indigenous cooking techniques, the cooking techniques that the Spanish brought in 1500s when they colonized Peru, etc., such that now I can go to a Peruvian restaurant and I know what to expect on the menu. I know what type of foods fit into that cuisine. And if you think about it, you probably have favorite cuisines. America is a country, because we are a melting pot with so many different immigrants, we have so many different cuisines available to us. So you can choose to eat from Italian cuisine or Mexican cuisine or Vietnamese or Japanese, etc. And we have so many cuisines present here in the United States. And cuisines are inherently tied to history. As I said, food is an integral part of our life. And so all historical events, all past peoples, all archaeological study, all different cultural movements, they have foods associated with them. And so we can understand the history of a people by exploring food trends over time. Differing food preparations can help us teach us about the technologies that developed in an area. Different food fusions can help us to understand synergies between different cultures and cultural contact. So food fusions can help us to understand the impact of global trade, slavery, immigration, colonialism, etc. And so when you travel to different parts of the world, you can learn about the histories of different cultures through their food experiences. Just like behind me, I have that image of the Last Supper, a Christian Catholic historical event, but retold and re-understood for its Peruvian context. Foods also come with rituals, and these can be rituals related to the actual preparation, the serving, and of course the eating and sharing of food. And you engage in food rituals all the time. Next week is Thanksgiving. You're going to engage in food rituals there. And all societies have them, all cuisines have food rituals, and a lot of them are incredibly interesting to participate in as part of understanding religion or understanding identity, right? So just as rituals bring people together to experience communitas, food rituals do the same thing. They bring people together in the sharing of food. Food is also something that we can study if we want to explore the idea of acculturation, if we want to understand how immigrants come to different countries, bring their cuisines, and then share them with others, right? So if you remember, we talked about assimilation. Assimilation is when people from a foreign culture come into a culture and they just have to accept the hegemonic norms. But food is often a way of seeing acculturation, where you keep certain aspects of your identity and you don't just adopt whatever the hegemony says. And food cultures are a great way to do that, a great way for immigrant groups to still feel connected to their identity. And some of you talked about being the children of immigrants, and one of the things that you really liked about your parents' home identity or your traditional historical identity from whichever country your ancestors came from is that you got to participate in the food rituals and you still had certain dishes that reminded you of home, that reminded you of your ancestors. So this idea of acculturation, you can still be a part of the mainstream culture, but bring your own cultural identity. Food is the easiest way to do this. And America is a great example. That's why we are such a melting pot of foods. And so we see diversity expressed through food. Not only do we have cultural diversity when you have different races or different socioeconomic classes, but you have culinary diversity when you have different foods that are brought together in different populations where people can share and embrace and experience and enjoy each other's culture in a really simple and enjoyable way, right? So you can appreciate other people, you can appreciate diversity by going, you know what, I do like eating foods from different cuisines. Maybe I want to learn about those foods, learn about their history and culture, and gain a better appreciation for their experience. And food is also a huge part of tourism. Throughout this entire lecture, you have been seeing photographs of food on each slide, and each one of those are photographs that I personally took somewhere in the world. And so as a tourist, one of my favorite things is eating a ton, right? Like, don't be skinny when you're traveling, man. You want to eat all of the delicious foods in order to embrace different cultures. And so it is the easiest way to get over racial or cultural intolerance, right? If you don't understand a group of people and you don't share their values, the easiest way to break in and start trying to understand them is try eating their food, try understanding their food rituals and taking a part in them, because all of us have to eat and all of us enjoy eating. And so that experience of sharing food allows visitors to new locations to actually appreciate that experience more. However, food and tourism can magnify inequality, right? I have been a tourist in developing countries, in incredibly poor countries, and tourists eat incredibly well because they are willing to pay for it. And so tourists often will eat better than locals. This was always a conflict that I had when I lived in Morocco. I would be at a restaurant and I would see a tourist, and the tourist would eat half of their food and then would start feeding the scraps to, you know, a cute kitten that happened to walk into the restaurant or something like that, while quite literally a poor person was sitting across the street and watching them do it. So tourists, it's really important to like be good global citizens, not waste food, not put strain on local chains in terms of like food delivery and consumption, to basically make sure that you are not taking food out of the mouths of locals, and also not like being a dick about it, right? Being sure that you give back to those who are poor in an area, being sure that you don't show disrespect to those who are struggling in the developing world. And we also see some conflicts around globalization because some tourists don't like to appreciate foreign foods. I never understand this, but I run into it all the time. When tourists are like, nope, I just want to eat what I like. So I want to go to Mexico and I don't want to eat Mexican food. I want to eat burgers and fries. And so you will often see locations start to offer foods just to appease tourists. And this can, again, put a lot of strain on local food chains. This can put a lot of strain on local economics. It can cause places to grow crops that they didn't normally grow, which can disrupt the ecology and environment of an area. So globalization can be great when people bring and share food with each other, but when especially tourists from the developed part of the world decide that they just want to bring their attitudes with them, this can cause a lot of problems and disrupt food systems at the destinations that they visit. All right, guys, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this week's lecture, and I am very much looking forward to talking about some of the food rituals that you've participated in and digging deep into all of the information we can draw from the Taco Chronicles so that we can better understand Mexican culture through its most iconic dish, the delicious taco. All right, thanks for listening.